Facebook is going live. I'll give it a couple seconds to check in. Thank you, brother. I appreciate you coming out. You got to book a few weeks in advance to get Johnny Henderson, right?
Yeah. Pretty busy, dude.
Then you're away.
I was in LA.
Yeah, Dream Center. That was pretty cool. We can talk about that too. But just for people, I've got you tagged on Facebook, so your peeps will know that you're here.
Oh, cool.
I don't know if it goes on your wall or to your notifications if you got them set that way. But tell, for those who don't know who Johnny Henderson is, and I'm anxious to get to know you because, you know, that brief little talk we had at 21 Days, I think it was. I'm like, dude, like, I get some respect for your on-stage game. I think you get some mad skills there. And then, you know, it seems to, especially with men, you know, I was there for men's group and whatnot, and we've got a really cool men's group. And I'm struggling with some beliefs. And I think it's the changing of beliefs that I'm struggling with because I didn't think it would be so painful. I'm coming off some things I thought were true. I thought I believed in.
Yeah.
And my truth is switched to something else that, you know, after giving it more thought and being educated on it, maybe a little bit of wisdom. I'm not 24 years old anymore. I don't think like a 24-year-old. And so, like, we immediately went down the rabbit hole in a very short discussion. Well, like, oh, respect, bro.
Yeah, it's good. And I think that in order to be a healthy human being, you have to hold everything lightly, like the universe in the palm of your hand. You know what I mean? Like, how is it? There's a parable about this. It's like this rabbi is walking down the street and he's got a coat, and in one pocket it says, "You are the most incredible, valuable like image of the divine." And then it says, and then the other pocket it says, "You're nothing but dust." Right? It's just this dialectic like tension between, like, you know, you have value and there's something intrinsic worth, but then at the same time, like, I don't know anything. I'm just like a speck. And so with that comes a level of humility. And I think that a healthy human holds those tensions. So their self-worth is established enough that they're like, okay, I'm grounded, but I'm open. You know what I mean? So, because you can't be so like, you can't have zero grounding because then you just get tossed in the wind, right? We've got to be grounded, but at the same time, I have open hands. And so I think belief specifically and faith is a process of just constant death and resurrection. The God I knew 5 years ago is not the God I know now. And I can say that with definitive, like, the God I know now is way more colorful and way more dynamic and exciting and a lot more complicated and a lot less judgmental than I thought maybe it was.
I'm about to say something I say often, and I catch myself, and I say it with humor. I'm like, you Christians, everything. And I've been one my whole life, but I grew up Catholic. So you got people that you feel sorry for that grew up Catholic, that are confirmed Catholics, that are so screwed up now with God and church and stuff like that. They don't know which way is up because of well, I don't know. I think there's some intrinsic training that goes with the Catholic religion. No shot at Catholic. I mean,
it's funny because, like, what I find is crazy, because I do agree that there are some, you know, tenets of the Catholic Church that just kind of hide and cloud the truth. But I mean, I'm listening to this guy named Richard Rohr right now, who's a Franciscan like priest. He's unreal. Like, oh my gosh, he's like, what he's saying is profound wisdom, and he's just got this whole center for contemplation and action, and he's just all about, like, just this, you know, emerging kind of faith and perspective on faith. And it's just like, it's coming from the Catholic Church. And then so yeah, so and that's something because I used to be very much like, oh yeah, this stuff has tainted the water in terms of, like, my perspectives on certain outworkings of the Christian faith. But then, like, I'm always surprised at who I find. So this is what it is because it's so easy to say the Catholic Church, right? Because then with that comes a lot of assumptions and a lot of presuppositions.
Then your fixed memory.
Your fixed memory, and so you have your own prejudice because your brain doesn't like to simplify things. I mean, so your brain doesn't like things complicated. It needs to simplify them. So you boil it down to its simplistic form or narrative, and you typecast things. And so therefore, and then that way you can log and categorize and move on. And so the Catholic Church has that. and then they have a very big bad PR problem right now. But individuals, there are some individuals that representative in that faith that they've got something.
Mm-hmm.
They're like, it's so you can't throw the baby out with the bathwater, because the individual sometimes, like, through whatever you feel about their tradition, they've got something. You know, you meet a mystic Catholic that has a relationship with this dynamic spirit of God, and they're so kind and loving and self-serving, like self-giving, and like, it's just surprising, so yeah, just that's where I challenge myself, because I definitely used to be on that front of kind of, no good, this is right, this is wrong. But then when you boil down to the level of the individual, you're just always surprised. Sometimes poorly.
Yeah.
You're surprised negatively. You're like, wow, I didn't know you could be so judgmental and arrogant.
Yeah.
But then on the other side, you could be surprised that, like,
it triggers a memory for me back in the day. I mean, my mother was never spiritual or religious of any sort when we were children. My father was Catholic. His mother was devoutly Catholic. Just, she made the sign of the cross when they drove by graveyards and churches and stuff like that. And that's cool. I told my brother,
that's religious, that's superstitious.
I told my brother the other day, he says, he's always laughing, I'm not Catholic anymore. And I remember my 8-year-old niece said to him one time, have you been baptized into another religion, Daddy? No. Well, then you're still Catholic, So, and I was talking to him the other day, I'm not Catholic. I said, dude, you came to my church in the second row in front of the Greg Sykes show and did the sign of the cross in front of everyone. Are you kidding me? You're not Catholic. That's okay. That's what I do. I'm like, don't embarrass me like
it's
that.
Probably just
I don't do that there.
Probably just like a safety blanket, just going back to reverting to like what he knows.
Yeah.
So.
But no, it triggers a memory in me. My mother wasn't religious at all. She came to faith at the end of her life, not the end of her life, the last few years or what have you. She was having a tremor from a stroke, and she was sneaking cigarettes at the apartment, and when she shouldn't have been smoking, that's partially what caused the stroke. And she was younger, but this set her back a great deal. And she was having a smoke, and a tremor came, and she crawled back to bed. But before she did, she put the smoke on. She said, "You get me out of this one, I'll never smoke another one." And the backdrop was Jimmy could never handle it. Well, it was a bitch losing my mom. It's been 9 years, and it'll never be the same. But anyway, she made a deal with God, and she stuck to it. And it was like, I think she was a believer. She just didn't practice, and she wasn't overly faithful. She didn't have any reason to. But when it came to making a deal for her life, that was important to her.
Yeah.
And it was important that she live for her family, and she stayed off smokes. And I remember the one time she was with a realtor friend of ours, up to no good at her house. And she's like, I smoked with Gary. I said, you did not. You promised God you're going to, she had cancer already then, I think. She knew she was, it was going to be long for her, but she felt very guilty that she had broken her pact with God, that she had a cigarette, you know what I mean? And she was being very cute about it, unbeknownst to her, but that changed her life. She went to see Monsignor Tonis at St. Alfred's. That was our parish, and she didn't have a connection. And he was if he's still alive, I bet you he's still a good-looking, big, tall, powerful man. And he set her right straight, man. Like, he told her, you carry this hate around in your heart, it's only gonna, it's things she knew already, but she was in a really bad way for a while. There was some really deep personal issues and that she had to resolve, and this Catholic priest straightened her right out. And
that's cool.
So much of it was a message about hate and forgiveness, and she forgave. And it was either that or carry it around with you, right? So, but we seem to see a whole lot of it out there as far as hate goes. And I'm trying to leave what little hate I have. Maybe it's a lot, I don't know. But it's placed in pretty specific places. And I don't like moving it around much. But, sometimes you just... I think we should be more honest with our conversations and go, you know what? Yeah, I struggle with it. It's there. And it's there for all of us. Whether it's just a thing like, oh, I don't know about you, your body shape or your voice, or when you just can't, you're not feeling somebody. And so many times that's happened. I big brown gay friend Josh, and he's flamboyant, and he's 6'5", and he's 300 some odd pounds, and he's a different guy. And the first couple times I saw him, I'm like, yeah, you're not, you know. I judged him completely. And I got to know the guy, and he's a beautiful man. But like, I was like, whoa, was I ever wrong with that? And you think about how many people we look at from a distance and get it wrong. And I think we're all like that. And I think, we're all Donald Trumps, unfortunately, to a certain extent.
It's true. And the reality is, if we don't keep that part of ourselves in check, it's like a virus, and it'll take over. And then we constantly are filter to the world is looking at like what's wrong, and we're not able to take time to enjoy what's right and what's good, and celebrate what was beautiful in people. And it goes back to what I was saying before. It's like our brains like to simplify things as their shortcutting mechanisms. They don't like to work too hard. It's trying to save calories. Actually, it's like a calorie.
Because we're gonna die because there's no food.
Yeah, because there's no food. And so like that's why storytelling is the easiest way for your brain to digest content, because it doesn't have to work hard. And so your brain is more likely to stay in tune with a story than if you just spout off facts. Your retention levels 10 to 20%, when it comes to just like facts and stats and stuff like that. But a story, you're looking at like the there's been studies like 90%
retention.
And so because your brain doesn't have to work very hard. And so with that shortcutting mechanism, yeah, we just love to simplify and judge and put things, and hate comes out of that. And so, and you nailed on the head when you said we're all Donald Trump, because like I love to think that I'm superior or like morally better than certain people, but from my faith bias, from my perspective, like part of what I believe the Christian message is, and in the awe of the cross, is this awakening moment that when faced with the reality, confronted with like God in flesh, like we will kill God in flesh. Like that's the depth of the depravity of the human heart, is when God comes to us, and even in the midst of receiving his death from us, he says, forgive them, they don't know what they're doing. Like there's just profound, that's where you get that showcase, that profound love of the actual heart of God. If that's the crescendo in the story of God, like that's the clearest picture we have of God, in the middle of receiving the death that our sin demands, he like says like forgive them, like, and he expresses that sense of love. But I have to acknowledge and realize is that the capacity of my human heart is the same. What I'm capable of is the same as like officer in a Nazi concentration camp. That capacity lives within me, right? And so
it's not too far a shift to get you to go from super good to super good. There's
and so we could play the comparative game, and I could say all day that like, oh, next to that guy I'm an angel, right? Yeah. You could be on the street, like living on the street, and you could be addicted to drugs, and you're like, well, at least I'm not as bad as that guy passed out with a needle in his arm. Like you always can play that game, right? And so the game is not about who's better, who's worse, but I believe that the game that we're supposed to play is like, what's the state and the condition of my human heart? And because if we can step outside of judgment, step outside of hatred, and only worry about, me and my wife always joke about starting a #WorryAboutYourself campaign. And so like literally just t-shirts, #WorryAboutYourself. Because there's this video on YouTube. It's like this 3 or 4 year old girl, and she's in the back seat, and she's trying to do up her belts and like get into her car seat, and her dad's trying to help her, and she's just like, worry about yourself, worry about yourself, worry about yourself. And it's just a funny video. So we always say that, but it's actually so true. It's the kind of the parable Jesus said, like you're pointing out like the speck in that guy's eye when you have like a plank in your own eye. And so and I think that what we're required to do is actually the thing that we are supposed to judge, are supposed to be critical of, is actually our own heart. And if everyone made that their primary journey in the world and only worried about their own human heart, the world would be a much better place.
Yeah, it seems so human, so natural, and so simple to be the broken, egotistical judgment machines that we are. We'll just look at social media. I even look at, what I post on social media. And I said to somebody the other day, like, that is not me. That is a social media profile. And that guy's angry. He's pissed off at politics. He's pissed off at a whole bunch of stupid people, what I consider to be stupid. And I actually feel like like I could start some conversations or help people see their, like, really, seriously. And I think most of the time it comes out of ego, judgment, and pride. Like, I've got something, like, I love to teach, but if you're not teaching something healthy, and no one's going to learn anything by following you on Facebook, but every post I post is probably tinged with a little bit of, I know something you don't know, which is garbage. It's so untrue.
So
but
here's the.
I don't think I'm different than anyone else.
Yeah. And I appreciate your vulnerability, because, like, most people wouldn't admit that. Most people wouldn't be like, it's coming from, like, ego. Like, most people aren't that self-aware.
Well, and this is why you're here, because I'm trying to get to the bottom of it. I'm trying to figure it out. Because
I appreciate that. That's the healthy dose of self-awareness. Here's the irony, is that confrontation-based communication is the least likely method of communication to actually convince people of your position. So we have
So coming from anger,
judgment, coming from anger and judgment, it just won't work. It doesn't work. So we have a lot of these protective mechanisms that our brain has. One is confirmation bias. We're not actually looking for what's true. We're looking for proof for what we already believe. And that's why I always say, like, fundamentally, faith is, at some level, like, it's metaphysical. It's, like, even irrational. It comes from an experience. Like, I had a profound experience where I felt hopeless and lost, and then all of a sudden I emerged into this new way of being. And then, therefore, I started to my confirmation bias kicked in, being like, okay, I'm starting to see the world this way, and I'm finding things that match up with that new worldview, right? And I'm starting to build, instead of what I was previously doing, was finding things that built on my old worldview. And so you don't actually look for truth. You look for proof for what you want to believe. So in an argument, people are just picking out things that add to their argument. They're not looking objectively at what you're saying and saying, like, oh, that's a very interesting thought. Maybe I should consider that. And then there's also the backfire effect, which, when faced with confrontation, people are more likely to get deeper, and there's, like, research around it, deeper rooted down into their own perspective and belief. And so,
and thank God, Trump's just brought this right to the surface for everyone to see that you're all the same.
Yeah.
And most people aren't seeing the hate that they have for Trump is what they claim he's got for, like, I mean, you're just, like, looking in the mirror, and people just don't get it. And
it's true. And like, it's I believe that, I don't know if I should get into this. I believe that Trump is a personification of the American heart. He is America personified. And some people don't like that. But then, in the process of them not liking that, they're the personification of the American heart. Which is very, like, it's a very divided.
I mean, Donald, and I'm not a voter. I'm not a supporter. I don't think that, I mean, he's entertaining, but he's a complete buffoon. He's like, I think he's just learned how to play the game. I think he's learned that if you say something enough, there's a certain crew that will just think it's true. And it's like, I seriously think he's playing a game. So, like, this guy could go down as one of the most brilliant manipulators of our time. I mean, he's not even a politician. He got elected to the top office. I'm still trying to figure it out.
I don't know if you that new Michael Moore documentary, Fahrenheit 11/9. I guess that's his inauguration day, because he's Fahrenheit 9/11, right?
Right.
And so when he was saying that his first presidential, like, campaign address was actually because he found out that some other celebrity was getting paid more per season, and he was just making a stink about how important he was, and it was actually just a press stunt, but it picked up so much traction he decided to actually run for president. Wow. And that's what Michael Moore kind of says in his documentary. I don't know.
I used to be a fan of Michael Moore, but he's to lefty now. It's unbelievable. I'm okay with you being a lefty. Just be objective. And this is what, when I hear you about building confirmation bias, I get it, and I love it. And we'll get into a little bit of psychological assessment or topics. It's kind of like, I call it like the girl with the person with the tray of beer, cold beer here. You got a thing around it in the tray. And your lie is there, and you go selling it. and you sell it, and all your friends are like, oh, yes, you and your lie, and they confirm you. But your good friends that know you really well, that care about you buying into this lie that you've created, are the first ones to call BS on it and go, yeah, don't bring that around here. I'm not buying that thing. That's not true, and here's the evidence. Here's all the reasons. And I think that's similar to the game he's playing, and I don't know. I think I've got a lot of gratitude for him because, one, everyone's talking politics now. Politics are not a conversation that most people have. I have it daily, but I'm addicted that way. So, and I think that everyone is talking politics now. Everyone, and whatever the flavor of the day is or what have you. And so I'm grateful for that. And at least, like, now I can spot a narcissist probably from 50 feet. Yeah, because I think he's on the spectrum that way a little bit. It's all about him and shifting blame and stuff like that. So I try to spend my time. The beginning and
end of what I feel about Donald Trump is basically, I don't care what you feel about his policies or his politics, but I just find it odd people actively celebrating somebody who is fairly morally bankrupt, like as a human being. Like he doesn't have a good moral stature, and that just makes me a little bit sad.
But that's not very different from many of the last presidents that have been.
No, and it's not. And again, it's
you
kind
have to have a certain
it's
level
really just a more characterized version of who America is and has been. Like it's nothing new on the street. Like even what he's doing is nothing new. It's just that he's just more hateable, right? And so, but yeah, I don't love the celebration of a person who maybe has these massive moral deficits in terms of his character as a person and how he treats people. And so, because I value dignity, I think, I think dignity is just basically an acknowledgement that, like, human beings are the extension of the divine. And dignity is just an acknowledgement of that. And so when someone doesn't have dignity for everyone, that's where I struggle. But, yeah.
Tell us what's going on with the youth. Derek Overholt just said hi, so I'm sure you know who he is.
Hey, Derek.
Hanging out at the church. And I got to sit in with your last production last year for YCM, was it?
CYM. Central Youth Movement.
They had. Well, did you always have the live?
We
portion of it, because
it used to be only live, and so now we're groups focused, trying to focus on relationship and conversation.
Right. Is there any chance that live thing will come back? Because I thought that was pretty. I wasn't very deep into it. Benjamin asked me to come on. I know he's off at school and stuff like that, but he thought there was a lot of value in that. So what could be cooler than a bunch of kids running around playing with all that expensive equipment?
That's true.
Pretty cool.
Yeah, no, we put those resources kind of into the Niagara Youth Collective, which is kind of all these churches in Niagara coming together and doing these massive rallies. And so we've been doing these big rallies at Lower Secord. Our last one had like 250 plus students in the middle of a snowstorm, which is cool.
So what is it, like worship?
So it's just kind of like there's like games, there's prizes. It's like a fun, just like a hype youth event, and then there's
were you all in the auditorium music, type of thing?
Yeah, worship music, and then there's a speaker. Our last one we had this guy named Jason Ballard, who is the kind of lead guy in a video series for Youth Alpha, and so well-known guy. He's spoken all over the world, and we actually had him come in and speak, and it was really good. It was awesome. We're planning another event for June as well at Lower Secord, and so so it's just a great opportunity. We're rallying around this thing called Alpha, which is it's actually just a program that students can run in their schools, and it really just creates a non-threatening place for people to have non-judgmental discussions about faith. Because you can't have those, you don't get the opportunity to have those discussions.
Yeah,
and so it just gives and even like the alpha training and stuff like that. It actually equips students to not have the answers, and to give people a space to just share what they feel, and to not try to force worldviews on people, and to kind of just talk about a Christian perspective on things and life and God. And It's really cool. And so we rally around that a little bit, and just encouraging students to make a difference and impact their schools. And so as churches, we come together, and we've been doing that. And so, yeah, we've had
This is kind of following the path of Bill's vision of like a Niagara serving church. Is that where they're going? Because somebody mentioned that the other day.
Unity has just been a massive theme for me, and like even within Central, it's like we're better together, right? We could do so much more when we're kind of united, and so because you can divide for 1,000 reasons. We love to divide and stay in our little camps and stuff, and so we could just make a way bigger difference if we choose to be united to make a larger impact and inspire and encourage students to.
Yeah, it's interesting. Somebody said the other day they were talking about diversity and how diversity is always touted as this huge benefit on society, and that diversity really only works when you have people that are rowing the boat in the same direction. So you're on a team, you're in the army, you're in a church. Diversity is all well and good because you're all going the same way.
Yeah.
As soon as you don't have that same unifying life purpose or whatever it is, job to do, then diversity everything divides you.
Oh yeah.
Whereas everything, when you're on the same team, even if it's a divisive issue, somehow it brings everyone together.
Yeah.
And I just thought, wow, is that true? I'm trying it on, and it makes me think of. Like, I had all these confirmation bias, too, on all these things I thought I knew. So, like, what kind of space did I get into where that I could change my mind, where I could go, wait a second. And I'm still, like, I want to be that guy. I don't want to ever think that I know it all and I've made up my mind. And I'm learning. But there were some big things like capital punishment and, when is life? I watched the Crowder video on Change My Mind. I'm pro-life. I was always pro-choice. That's how I grew up. In political speak, I was a Green Party lefty and sounded good to me. So I had all the speaking points and I could argue it to the death. But, the Green Party would also stand up and say, oh, we're pro-life. We respect all life. Oh, wait a second. Except that, like, they'll go out and they'll protest at Marineland. But they won't stand for a 6-month-old fetus because it's not a baby yet. It's not born yet. So, yeah, I wonder where what place did I get to that allowed me to go, wait a second, that doesn't sound like a good, solid opinion. Like, they're killing 1 million babies a year in one country in the world. Like, wow. So, anyways, I'm rambling now. I can't remember where we're going. But, I wonder, like, we display so much of it. And then, so what do you have to do to open yourself up to be available to say, hey, maybe I should consider that point of view? Because I think so many people are just cemented.
Yeah, I was asking, I asked this leader that I really respect. I was like, how do you, in a world that's so divided, that's so dualistic and polarized? Because I think, dualism is actually the fundamental error that we're currently operating in. Black and white, left and right, up and down. And the world's so much more complicated than that.
There's a lot of gray.
Like, I would say I'm a very conservative liberal, because I fundamentally don't think that our job is to monitor human behavior. You know what I mean? Obviously, we need laws. We need to keep, we need some order and structure. But, like, my job, I believe, is not to monitor every decision that you make and to place judgment on that. And so it makes me very liberal, but at the same time, I'm very conservative, because what I fundamentally believe for myself is I would say it was traditionally conservative. But I do believe that people should have a scope of free will that maybe stretch way beyond what I would agree with morally. Mm-hmm. And so that's a complicated worldview. That's not like I'm left or I'm right. I'm kind of like, I'm a mix. And so anyways, I asked this leader this question. I was like, how do you have conversations in a world that's so polarized? He's like, be genuinely curious. Someone has a worldview that you cannot stand or you don't understand, actually care, actually trying to understand where they're coming from. And the crazy thing is, you'll find out that you'll find some like deep hurt, or you'll find like, something in them that's made them hate you'll find.
Or you can backpedal far enough that you can find something that you both commonly agree on, and then kind of baby step up into the where do you differ, because there's some point when
there's
you're
like
together.
convergence. There's like absolutely. And so, but that was really inspiring to me. It's like, okay, be genuinely curious. But I think even for you to get to the place of curiosity with somebody who has a different opinion than you, you have to not see the world dualistically. You have to push your oversimplifying brain to be like, the world is more complicated than right and wrong, black and white. And I'm sounding very postmodern. I'm actually from the definition of postmodern. I'm like, words have meanings, meanings matter. Let's deconstruct. What do you mean by that word? That's what usually I am. But the world is more complicated. So, and it's so funny because we get angry with people being like, oh, they're so left, or oh, they're so right, and we're reinforcing the label that we don't want them to have. we're actually polarizing things more by stating objectively that they are this, and they're not even giving them the opportunity for them to be more dynamic, right? Because you actually get into it, then maybe there's actually something dynamic about what they're saying, where there's truth, and that truth that you might also agree with is informing the decision. You just have different kind of ways of outworkings of that truth. And so, because fundamentally, even like the left, they're rudimentary based out of compassion. Like they just want everyone to do whatever they want. They just want to be nice to people. They want to be compassionate. The problem with that is that, again, it's dualistic. It's not dualistic. It's oversimplified. It goes like the same root kind of thing. It's an oversimplistic view of the world. So compassion, when left to its own devices and becomes an ideology, becomes this rigid, just simplistic form of looking at everything in the world, can become harmful. Because compassion sometimes is somebody who needs a sense of, guidance and reorienting of their life and their priorities, and just blind acceptance of that just might not be the best thing for them. Right. Mm-hmm. And so there's the balance of that dialectic of truth and love. Right. And so, so anytime you oversimplify people in the world, you stop listening, and you're unable to engage that conversation. And so, because it's always more complicated than you think.
And there's so much gray, and it's just talking about ones and zeros and black and white and stuff like that. And you're right. And those deep philosophical questions are always so interesting to me, and I think that now they're more important than they ever have been, because, well, are we getting to a better level of communication now with social media? Not that that's a form of communication, but even these long form type of interviews like what we're doing here, there's no commercial breaks. I don't have to wind up for every 9 minutes for some to sell an ad. I wish I had, but it's, and you get your chance to say your piece. It's not like they're not like chopped up little sound bites. And I wonder how traditional media stays alive, selling an ad every 5 or 10 minutes on radio, or the same news recycled every quarter, all day.
It's funny because when I go to my parents' house, my parents they're caught in they're just. I haven't had cable. I can't even tell you how long. I don't even remember last time I had cable, and so they just leave the TV on and it's running all day. And the ads after ads, I'm like, it's so funny to me that you pay to see so many ads. That's just such a foreign concept. And so, yeah, I think has it? We moved past this. Has it no got the memo? My parents haven't got the memo. We moved past this. We don't pay to watch ads anymore.
No, we skip by them. We record everything. We fast forward over it, or we steal from the internet or something.
Put an ad blocker, and we don't. Yeah. We avoid it, and so.
Yeah, ad blocker was a dream.
What's funny? What's interesting is that people want to avoid targeted ads like crazy.
They're spooky though.
They are spooky
because your phone's not even on. You don't even use the internet, and all of a sudden you're talking to your buddy about you need a bicycle pump, and a bicycle pump's the next ad on
I swear they must be listening. The weirdest one I ever had. This is crazy. Is my wife and I have a foster daughter, and she came in and she had literally 5 broken Blackberries from her adolescence. And I was like, she's like, you're not gonna be able to sell these things. Nobody wants to buy a broken Blackberry. All right, those are the words that came out of my mouth. I'm not even joking. 5 minutes later, I open Instagram, selling used Blackberries. Like, what a random ad. Like some
Not random.
online pawn shop selling, and I'm talking like an album of photos on Instagram, like swipe blackberries. I'm like, okay, that's not soap. That's used blackberries. So
Same
weird.
thing with the microphones.
Yeah.
Before I got microphones, I was looking around for microphones. What do you think came up? The exact microphones I was looking at all the time. I'm like, and then Quora. I subscribed to Quora. I didn't really know what it was, but it's like a discussion group or what have you. And every email digest was only about one thing: narcissism. Recovering from narcissism. What is narcissism?
Google
how to get back at a narcissist. Like, everything was all about narcissism. I'm like, well, that's weird, you know, because I've never really been on Quora. And what's this all coming from? So the other day, I was Googling something, how to use something in a sentence. I can't remember what the word was. What does Quora send me the next week? How to use such and such in a sentence. I'm like, you guys are in my friggin' search.
Yeah. So Google got an audio clip of you talking somewhere, and they were like, this guy has a voice for radio and is a friggin' narcissist. And so he got blasted.
Cut.
Blasted.
That's it. It's over. Say goodnight, Johnny. Yeah, there goes Johnny.
No, the stuff I search on Google, like, I get that because I'm like, Google's
That's
like,
fair game.
It's fair game. But the stuff that you just say, and you're like, I've never typed that.
And your
I've
phone.
only thought that. Yeah, there was actually a story of like a dad finding out his daughter was pregnant because they sent ads to his house because predictively his daughter was pregnant. And so he got this whole, I don't know, he got something from them. Anyways, and he ended up finding his daughter was pregnant because they sent her all this stuff before she even, like, yeah, it was super weird.
Honey, is there something you want to tell me? No. Why? Well, Daddy's been getting a lot of ads for diapers and
Yeah.
preschool.
Yeah, every time I go on the home computer, it's all diapers and
You know, I like the old days when I used to get some hardcore porn. Like, at least they knew my search habits.
Yeah, I bet there's probably some students who've gotten in some serious trouble based on how the ads have changed. Like,
Yeah.
even just like being like, you want to order more medical marijuana? It's like, shoot, I got.
Yeah,
but
you think
not very
it's
many people have home computers
delete
anymore.
search history just doesn't cut it anymore because
No.
Quora's got it, Facebook's got it, Instagram. Well, they're all they all own, same owners, but
Yeah, what's
that's awesome.
what's the name of the supercomputer in Terminator? Do you remember?
No.
He's got it.
What was it? I can't even remember the supercomputer in Odyssey 2001. What was it? Al. Was it Al?
Al's got it. Al's got it locked and loaded. You can't get rid of it.
The AI is coming for us, man. These robots are almost human now, and once they figure out they can learn past our functioning learning ability.
I don't know. I can't. That stuff trips me out.
Mm-hmm.
Like the Google had to shut down one of their AI like streams because it was learning how to better translate, and it created its own language. It was translating between English and Chinese or something like that, and it created its own medium language. So it started to communicate this medium language to make the translations, and it was AI, and they had to shut it down because like, we don't know what it's saying. It's like, that's so scary. It's like, just shut it down. It's good. Because every science fiction AI movie has the same premise where it's like
the out of control computer.
you give AI, the super like sentient AI, the ability to make decisions on behalf of humanity, and they always are like, yo, you're the problem, so we're gonna kill you all. Like, that's pretty obvious. This world would be much better if you weren't on it. Everything would be thriving. So that's literally
You
the
want to
theme
take care
of
of all the oceans and trees and the climate and everything
yeah.
like that. There's a simple cure for it. Just exterminate the human race. Perfect.
Yeah, that's
one truth that the humans are not willing to admit, that the supercomputer would be the first to get right and say,
you're the
guys
problem.
are the problem.
But I like, are we that disillusioned that we don't know we're the problem? Like, we don't know that, like, maybe we should probably stop using plastics and, like, fossil fuels, and like, you know, you.
But every time we think we're up against it, we've got peak oil, we've got mountains of plastics in the oceans, we've got climate change, we've got a population of 7 billion now. There was a time when they predicted that 7 billion was 2 billion too much, right? And now, you know, I said to someone the other day, we could be at 20 billion and still say, well, still lots of oil, still lots of oxygen, still lots of rain, still lots of, you know, still lots of dark, still
I'm
lots
not
of
as
sun.
nihilistic as a lot of people out there. I'm like, I believe that because there is a level in which perception dictates reality. So I believe the world's going to collapse. I don't want to get too deep in this, but metaphysically, I believe that there is actually like, you increase. Have you seen Tomorrowland? Tomorrowland has the same premise. It's
everyone
like,
thinks of the
everyone
same
thinks
thing.
the world's going to end, so the world like begins to end. And so, but I do believe there's something to that. I believe that there is some sort of. So I don't get into that headspace. I don't think it's helpful. But at the same time, like, I'm a pastor, so I'll use the Bible. But Paul says everything's permissible, but not everything's beneficial. And so there's certain things in the world where I'm like, yo, we don't have to be doing this anymore. Why are we still doing it this way? But it's like, you always follow the muddy trail. But it's like things like, why aren't we doing renewable energy? Even if like you can debate global warming, whatever. Like, it's just, it'd be better if we were using renewable energy, would it not be? Like, why don't we just do that? Like, and so sometimes humans are fickle, and you know, the money ends up winning at the end of the day, and robots would see through all of that and be like, yeah, you're greedy and you're killing people and the world's dying because of you. We should probably just start eliminating you. Like, that's what, it wouldn't take long for an autonomous machine to decide that, you think you're the reason why the world sucks.
Now, tell us a little bit about your former life, because I have a feeling that you were Johnny Henderson, out of control maniac at one time. You weren't always a walking a straight line pastor type of guy, were you?
No.
No?
I don't know if I still am.
How long did it take you? Before you said, you know what?
Yeah, so I didn't grow up in a faith-based home at all, and the morality itself was pretty loose in my home.
Okay.
And so so at 16 I basically found myself completely morally bankrupt. And so
how did you know?
Well, there was a distinct moment. Most people don't have like a wake up call kind of moment. For me, it was like getting beat up at a party and sleeping in a park and waking up and not having any friends, and everyone being like, we're done with Johnny. He just doesn't know how to control himself. He's always drinking way too much, and he's always causing trouble, and he's just, yeah.
So it was your doing.
Oh yeah, totally. I brewed that myself. And so
into a beating and sleeping in the park.
Yeah.
And woke up friendless and hopeless and said, "This is it."
Yeah, and I became really angry, depressed. Not just like depressed, but like angry. I wanted the world to burn.
You mean as a way to being, or that
like after that for the next couple months. And so I wanted to watch the world burn. Like, I hated myself, I hated everything, I hated everyone. And then these kids at school kept inviting me out to their church, which was Central. And I decided eventually one day, I was like, fine, I'll check it out. Like, they're bugging me. And I'm like, I went and basically laid out, like, fundamentally you keep going back to these modes of being where
habitual ways of being.
Yeah, so like you and to try to find meaning in life. And for some people it's drinking, for some people it's drugs, for some people it's sex, for some people it's money, for some people it's popularity. But you keep going to those things, and it's this empty cycle you keep going back to. And you wake up in the next morning, and you feel empty, and you feel like this void. And so you immediately start searching for that thing that's going to satiate that emptiness. And then you find it again. You feel that kind of that moment of like, oh, this is great. And you wake up and you feel empty. And basically explained the cycle of life that I was living in, and just kind of shared that like there's a whole different way to live life, and that like I could be forgiven, I could have a fresh start, and that I could like have purpose in life. And I had never heard anything like that. Like, it was so foreign to me, and they hit me like a ton of bricks. And so I remember I went home that night, and my mom was like, "You went to church tonight? How was that?" It was so foreign to my family. Like, what? You went to church? It was so weird. And I remember I was like, I couldn't find words to describe like what I experienced. Because it was like my whole life I had been learning in my head. and like how I can use whatever information I'm collecting to manipulate the world to get what I want out of it. So it's just like, yeah, so how do I get more friends? How do I be cool? How do I try to like, satisfy this thing, lie, steal, do whatever. I was just mixed up, and I was just trying to collect every information I can to benefit myself. And then, so my whole life of my whole worldview and experience is built up here. And then all of a sudden that night, a conversation just descended into my chest, into like the core of my being, a place that I didn't even know was there, like a part of like my soul. And like, it was like, ooh, what is this? I'm feeling a way of being that I didn't know was out there. And so I remember I tried to find words. How would
you describe that?
I would describe it as like fundamentally like an awakening experience. Like
an awareness of something.
An awareness that there's more to what is real than what I had known. It was like, I always explain it like...
It's pretty easy at 16, like, let's face it.
Yeah.
You think you know everything at 16.
That's true. I always explain it like there's like, you live in, your life is like a house, right? And you've explored its rooms, you've tried all these different things, and like, and some people with a lot of life experience, they've tried the women, they've tried the drugs, they've tried this, they've tried the gambling, they've tried, making lots of money and whatever. You're like, oh, okay, I guess this is what life's got to offer. I've seen all the rooms. I get it. And so I'm just going to kind of live over here. This is what I've decided. But then like when you have that like deep spiritual encounter, it's like God's like, oh, come down this hallway. And you're like, what hallway? And you go down this hallway and he opens up a door to a room that you didn't even know was in your house. It was like that. It was like I walked into a room. I'm like, oh, I didn't even know this was here. I didn't know life could look like or feel like this. And so I remember I sat down on the couch with my mom. My mom was like, how was church tonight? And I was like, it was good. But like good had like this weight on it. Like it was like the word.
Is she feeling it?
To a new meaning. Well, she felt it a couple weeks later because...
No, she didn't feel the weight of your word good at that moment in time?
I mean, I think she did because like I was like pensive and contemplative, which is like, wasn't my mode of, working in the world. wasn't naturally like this very like stoic contemplative type at 16. And so she knew something was up. But it was a couple weeks later for my mom where I walked in the kitchen. It was a couple weeks, about a month later, where I started to like kind of walk down this road and start to explore things. And I had a moment of like serious awakening where I was like, I think this is the road I'm going down. And my mom, I was like, Mom, I need to talk to you. Can we talk in the kitchen? My mom like got real nervous. She's like, oh crap, like someone's pregnant. He's gonna go to jail. Like, there's some serious trouble. Like,
does she have previous history of you saying, Mom, we're going to talk in the kitchen, so that she knew, like, you had to set it up as a big deal, or just out of order?
Yeah, I mean, like, my parents dealt with a lot. Like, I remember their one anniversary having to come home, or walking home, 4:00 in the morning, and I'm super stoned and drunk, and they had, leave their kind of anniversary vacation because I didn't come home that night, and, like... they just dealt with a lot of just like teenage, trying to figure out the world stuff. And I wasn't in a space where I lied about everything. Like I never told my parents the truth. And so I was in this space of dysfunction. So for her to imagine the worst case scenario was probably easier than a better case scenario.
Okay.
And so, so I said, Mom, I need to talk to you. And she like got real nervous. And I was like, hey, I just want to let you know that you don't ever have to worry about me again. Like God's changed my life and I'll never be the same. And I just want to let you know I'm okay. I'm gonna be good. And my mom was like, for her, that was the moment that God in this like intimate, real sense became like real to her in a way. And so, because for her, she kind of grew up with some like, she was American. She grew up with some kind of like, Billy Graham and some level of like Christianity, but it was very much like, you sprinkle it on top of stuff, but it wasn't this real dynamic. And she even actually went to my dad and said like, John, I think God did something to Johnny. Like he's so different. Because I literally went from lying all the time, constantly just getting in trouble and whatever, to like being like kind and honest and like thoughtful. And so I remember even in high school, kids were like, what the heck happened to Johnny? Like he's so different. And so, and it's always a journey, but...
So you didn't hit your head?
What do you mean?
You didn't bump your head and like him. There's the stories of Sam Kinison. He hit his head really hard. Alex Jones hit his head really hard, and then they became these brilliant. They had a personality change too, right?
Really? That's funny. No, I didn't. I didn't hit my head.
Major traumatic head injury.
But I do believe.
I find that hard to believe.
I do believe the God experience is located in like the right hemisphere of the brain. So the logical hemisphere is your left, where you do all your processing, analytical thinking.
Where it tells you that God can't possibly exist.
Yeah, that's the brain that tells you like no, like deductive reasoning, like
Don't be
vis-a-vis science, and like it's not. It's immaterial, so therefore it doesn't exist.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's your left brain. But your right brain, that's where I believe that it would be like the antenna for spiritual experience. There's a really good TED Talk called A Stroke of Genius. And there's this neuroscientist who had a stroke, and her brain, the one half of her brain kept shutting off. And
after the stroke?
No, during the stroke.
Oh.
But she was self-aware enough as a neuroscientist to be able to deconstruct her experience having a stroke.
She wrote it all down.
Yeah, she in the TED Talk she explained it, but she said she was dialing 911 and she went like, "Oh my gosh, I'm having a stroke." Her left brain's firing. "Oh my gosh, I'm having a stroke. I need to call 911." And she goes to press 9, and all of a sudden the world goes jello, and she feels like one with the universe. And she's having this like almost out of body experience. And all of a sudden her left brain like kicks back in, and she's like, "Oh my gosh, 9, 1," and then boom, like because the stroke was cutting off her ability to use her left brain. And so her whole research changed. She went from just researching the brain to be like, because there's something profoundly beautiful about it for her. It was like it was transcendent, it was spiritual, like whatever. And for her, she's like, how do I encourage and get more people to have experiences? She's still looking at it from the scientific perspective, right? So she's like, she hasn't made that maybe mystical leap into like, maybe there's, some metaphysical thing happening here. But I love her perspective. Like, I want more people to have experiences in their left brain, their right brain, where they can have this way of being, there's so much peace there. She was described and stuff. And so for me, I think that it's in the abstract that God exists, right? And I don't believe that there's not rationality behind an existence of a being. Like fundamentally, every single person desires to have purpose, right? And the only way to, I believe, philosophically, to have purpose is if there is a God. You're created. There's intentionality. Because every atheistic philosophy ultimately is built on like existentialism, which is you basically come to the conclusion that I'm the same value as a basketball, and everything that I create in life is manufactured meaning, and I just got to come to grips with that. I'm making meaning out of things, but that's just the reality of all things. Nothing intrinsically has value. It's all kind of made up, but you just got to be okay with that. It's a very nihilistic way of being. And so I think an existential crisis is really healthy, but I think like rooting your life in existentialism can be very unhealthy. But anyways, so there's no atheistic philosophy that really answers that question of like, is there purpose? Like, do I have purpose? It can't satiate. And every single person has that. So even for me, I'm like, what are the chances that every single person has a desire to have purpose? And the only thing that can properly satiate that is a belief in a being that created you with purpose. And so therefore the logical deduction is like, there must be something to that. Like, what are the chances that everyone has that desire and notion? Like, what evolutionary function does that desire and notion serve? You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, that's my opinion on that.
So, yeah.
I forget where I was going with that. Where was I going with that?
Oh, you're talking about your mom in 16 and the shift and telling her that you shifted, and that's where that conversation came out of. But could be on something totally different. I'm fine. You can bounce around all over the place. I'm going to get you some more water.
I'm just sipping away.
Yeah. Yeah, I started out the conversation with asking you to tell me something about the old Johnny back in the day.
Yeah, actually, last night at CYM, the youth, I was talking about some old Johnny stories.
Oh yeah, well you're a storyteller, so and I get that from your time on the platform at church too, man. There's storytelling is a valuable trait.
What's your best story?
I don't know. I tell the story about my mother, having that switch on faith. These type of questions always leave me frustrated because, I remember watching City Slickers and being really upset that I couldn't figure out what the best day of my life was. Because everyone's had a child or got married or remember the first time they went out for a drink or drove a car or something. Nothing ever impacted me like that. I haven't been there yet. I haven't watched my bride walk down the aisle. I haven't seen my baby born. I haven't hold my, so I don't know if I have a favorite story, but I do enjoy them. I think it depends on who I'm sitting with and what they need or what they're not need.
That's fair.
Probably a too absolute a term, but I have a knack for calling people on their self-created lies that they've invented as truth. And it doesn't take very long. And I'm not like, I'm all in somebody's head and going to figure everyone out, but I think that most reasonable people appreciate being, hey, is that really real for you? What do you mean? And then the defenses go up and they're like, well, it's just, you said a couple things that conflict each other and I'm not really buying what you said and I don't know you that well, but I would guess that this is something that you made up. It's not even true. And then they're like, okay. And now you stung them. Now they want to know more, right? So I think it depends because everything's a story. So nothing's coming to me right now, but I got a few of them. That was a good one. A story about my mother, putting out the smoke and saying, Jimmy could never handle this. I need to stay alive. So I'm going to make a deal now. And we're going to stay alive, right?
It's good because every good story, Donald Miller has a book called, he's Story Brand. But every good story has like a hero who goes on a journey, encounters a guide, a Yoda type, and then is confronted with a decision, and they make the decision for the good or the bad. And so that's just the classic good story. Because your mom is confronted with a guide, which is that moment. That moment is in place of that guide, and she has a decision to make, and she makes it for the good or the bad. And so, and then, being faced with our mortality is something universal. And so
I used to come home. Well, not come home. I'd come home to my mom's place. I remember walking in on her one time, and she's in the kitchen watching church. I'm like, "What the hell are you doing?" "Oh, I like him." Robert Schuller? You're kidding, right? Robert Schuller, the Crystal Cathedral.
I don't know.
He was the white-haired TV preacher.
Okay, I think I know what you're talking about.
And now his son, Bobby, I think he forced out the. How does that work? You take over, you throw your old man out, and you become the lead preacher. I remember, I'm an Eagles fan, as you can tell. Got a little bit of Eagles paraphernalia. And I've been an Eagles fan ever since I've been a football fan. I'm very loyal. And I started as a Philadelphia Flyer fan as a kid. And I think I just kind of was like, well, what's Philly up to in football? So when I got into football, Randall Cunningham was there. Anyway, what was the story I was telling again?
It was about your mom.
Yeah.
What were you?
Oh, I brain farted on it. See what happens? It'll come back to me. I used to think that was a real problem. Like I had something wrong with me. Especially in this medium, everyone does it. You're like you get distracted. You're like, oh yeah, okay. Like your mind goes blank.
So the hard thing for me is that when I can't remember a story or when I have a thought, but then the conversation takes another turn, is to let my ego die and let the conversation go where it needs to go.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because everything in me is like, yeah, but back to what we were saying before. I had a story about that.
I really gotta make a point.
And so because it's something, it's self-awareness. Because the person who always like wants to redirect the story so they can fit in what they want to talk about and they don't let it take its natural course. It's like it's not in harmony with what's happening. So that's something I'm like, I recognize that myself. I'm like, oh yeah, I'll always like try to.
I find myself telling stories at men's group only because it's a way for them to understand who I am, because I'm not simple. In this journey, in this deep dive into, well, why can't I put a finger on my favorite memory, or just even a good, like, if you're to say like it was the best time of your life, I don't know, give me a couple months and I'll get back to you. That's how I expect my mind to work now, because like it wasn't available for me there. And then I started searching for beauty in things that maybe I didn't think were so beautiful. I remember I was at a wedding, a Colombian wedding, a buddy of mine, good friend of mine, still a good friend of mine, and my parents had split. They were divorced, or they'd split, and there was tension, and they were at the same table, and I was a mess. And I'd probably been partying the night before, and it's my boys, right? And then the day of, it's a lot of pressure, and the Colombians, they do things, they're Toronto Colombians too, so there's no expense spared, and blah blah blah. And I remember being behind the wedding cake and hiding because I got filled all up out of nowhere. I remember looking at my mom. She was with my uncle. My dad was with his girlfriend, and I lost it. I broke down. I didn't know if it was so beautiful because Luis and Anna were dancing, or I think it was the first dance, and I lost it. And I thought that was a bad day for me. And then when I look back at it, I maybe it's because there wasn't enough good things to, the best day of my life didn't immediately pop out for me. So I had to consider that one as a shift where I was filled with something, and there was something else going on that had never been, like, I'm not a big emotional guy, but like I was ruined.
So it's interesting because I think there's a reason why that's so profoundly important. Because we as human beings, have you ever seen the movie Boyhood?
I don't think so.
So it was filmed over a course of 12 years with the same actors. And so this director found the kid and a sister and a mom, dad, and this whole family. They were obviously not related, but like the actors casted it. And for every year for 12 years, they filmed for a month. And the movie is my favorite movie. But some people are super frustrated by it because there isn't really, I don't want to say it's the most honest raw capture of what it feels like to be a human, I think.
Wow.
But there's not a point. By the end of the movie, the only thing you're left with is like, I get why he is the way he is. Like, there's not really like a crescendo. There's not like a aha moment or anything like that. There's just like a, I get him. Like, it's like after hearing somebody's life story, and you feel like, I just feel like I know you now. It was like that, but in a movie form. But anyways, the strange thing about that movie is they don't choose like these like crazy big moments. There's a couple, like his graduation and stuff like that. But he's like, it literally jumps from like he's washing dishes at his job, and he tries to talk with his boss.
That's
to like
a great point.
So and then he jumps to like he's having a conversation with his dad in a truck, and then he's like in the dark room. And his photography teacher has a conversation with him, and he's like, standing in the kitchen with his mom. Like, it's just like literally scene to scene. So seemingly random, but what it kind of made me think was that life is actually just accumulation of just seemingly random moments that just shape us somehow. And so, and I might be drawn to that notion because part of what I used to do was these like high school motivational presentations where we try to create a moment, like an impactful moment to help people.
Yeah, you want to be the guy that I remember in grade 10. I saw Johnny Henderson came to my school, changed my life forever, that type of.
Yes, yeah. So,
but manufactured, like deliberately.
Yeah, so like it would be a motivational presentation. So I had an objective, right? So the objective would be like empathy, help students understand what empathy is and how empathy can positively impact their life. But because you don't want to be disillusioned to say like, oh, this is going to make all the difference, right? But at the same time, there is this abstract reality to like any random moment can change someone's life.
The possibilities.
And so, and I had that actually incredible experience where I went back to a school a year later, and a girl like came up to me crying, and she kind of expressed that after last year when I was at the Preston school sharing my story, she decided to check herself into like a mental health institution. She kept my signature on her wall the whole time she was there, and she said, if you could get through what you went through, then I knew I could get what I went through. Wow. And I'm like, that was a humbling experience, because it wasn't like a moment of like, oh, look at me. It was like, who am I? Right? Like,
But that very
a
easily
shadow
could've-
away was like a 16-year-old depressed kid who didn't want to live. And now I'm standing in this moment where I get to be that person for her. Like, who the heck am I? Like, how? Like, what a
Well, that
privilege.
could have very easily just completely pumped up your ego. You could have taken that on as like, look at me. Who am I? Yeah. You know? So,
Yeah, no, but it was a very humbling, like, what the heck? How do I get this? How does this happen? Life is strange and weird. But anyways, all to say is that there is merit to that profound moment where life just captures you, and it does. It affects your heart,
and it catches you by surprise, and that opens up a couple cool stories for me that I've told many times. And there was a time when I was I don't know, grade 6, 7, 8, somewhere in there, and I had left my books at Britton's place. We lived at Scott and Bunting, so we're on the north side of Scott. Britton was over on Wakeland, Royal Manor. And Jim Britton, I just saw him the other day, James Britton. Now he goes by, he's a realtor, and, he was one of my best friends in grade 6, 7, something like that. And I was leaving my place on Tuesday's Place. My parents we all had our house on a little circle off of Tavistock there. And I was going to Britton's to get my books. There was no rush. I wasn't in trouble. There wasn't I was just, I'm going to walk over to Jim Britton's, get my books. And I remember it was really snowy. Like, it just, and the sound dampening that comes with a major snowfall. Everything's super quiet. And I hit this peaceful state, unbeknownst, I don't know how I got there. I don't think I've ever gotten back, but I remembered this strange joy of elation